Good afternoon. It is 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, May the 11th, 2021. I want to welcome you to the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center virtual field trip on this rainy day. It just started pouring down. We want to say a very special welcome to Young, Kaye, Daisy Zavala, and Martha Turner Riley, all of the Dallas ISD, West Main of Lancaster ISD, Spicewood Park, Southwest ISD, and Roosevelt from Manhattan Ogden ISD. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the program, but most of all, we hope that you learn. Teachers, if you're watching, you have not signed up, please do so. Go to www.tiny.cc/EEC register and sign up. This is just for our attendance records only. Program today is Structures and Behaviors of Organisms. During this virtual field trip, students will explore how structures and functions enable organisms to survive in their environment. Students will also explore examples of traits that offspring inherit from their parents and behaviors that are learned. Ms. Fuller will discuss structures and functions of terrestrial or land organisms. Mr. Monroe will do structures and functions of aquatic organisms. Ms. Nash will tell you about inherited traits, and Ms. Ramirez will introduce you to some learned behaviors. You cannot ask us a verbal question during this program, but you can go to www.tiny.cc/EEC /question/answer and send us in your questions. We'll do our best to answer them during the program. If not, I will send the answers to your teachers and they can discuss them with you. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Ms. Fuller is going to tell you all about structures and functions of terrestrial organisms.
Good afternoon on this rainy day. My name is Mrs. Fuller. I'm calling you from room 502, and this is my lab assistant, Lauren Chicken. Lauren Chicken is a bird, and one of the very easiest ways to tell that, she has feathers. Only birds have feathers. And I want to show you her wing, maybe. Come on, Lauren. Okay, look at that. Can you see those real strong black feathers back there? Lauren, even though she's a chicken, she can fly a little bit, and she uses those flight feathers to fly. I want to show you some other feathers. This is another flight feather from a different kind of bird, and you'll notice that the filaments are all hooked together. And that helps make a solid face to it so that when the bird pushes against the air, it helps the bird to fly. The structure is the flight feather. The function is flight. Here's another one. This is called a contour feather. This feather lies against the body of the bird and helps the bird be aerodynamic, helps it slip through the airstream. So the function is the structure is a flight feather, contour feather, and the function is aerodynamic. This is my favorite one. This is called down. So the structure is down, but the function is warmth. If you'll notice, none of the filaments are hooked together. They're all separate, and it traps air against the body of the bird and helps the bird stay warm. And here is a different kind of feather. This is a peacock feather. The male peacock has these in his tail. He has a lot of them, and it's got two functions. The first one is to make him look very intimidating. If he spreads his tail out with all these very fancy feathers, it makes him look very large, but it also makes him look like he's full of eyes. So that can be kind of intimidating to another animal. The other thing is this is very attractive to peahens, who are the female peacocks. So the structure is the peacock feather. The function is attract a mate and also to make himself look very intimidating. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to look at some other structures and functions of other terrestrial organisms, and that means organisms that are on land. It's where Latin word for earth is terra. It's where we get our Spanish word tierra, and it's also where we get our English word terrestrial, land animals or land creatures or organisms. So we're going to talk about structures and functions of terrestrial organisms. Here we have a beak, a bird, a tortoise, and a tree, and grass, obviously, too. Okay, let's keep these essential questions on terrestrial organisms in our mind as we go through the program. Number one, what's the structure of a turtle that helps it stay alive? We're going to look at several. And number two, what is the function of that structure and how does it work? So on the left, we have a tortoise, a sulcata tortoise, and look at the scales on his leg and the shell, the turtle shell. In the middle, we have an extinct turtle, but what you're looking at is the turtle's skeleton. How does the skeleton help the animal stay alive? And then over on the right, we've got some turtle eggs. So let's start with claws. The structure is the claw. Now, on the picture on the left, that's actually an eagle's claw, and we call those talons. And it helps the eagle grasp its prey. The eagle is a raptor, a bird of prey. It's a predator, and they're big birds, and they get relatively large animals like bunnies and things like that, not mice. So he's going to need those big, strong talons, which are a form of claw, to help him in his predation. The guy over on the right is a reptile. His claws have a different function. The function of those claws is to dig. Now, I'm going to show you a few seconds of a National Geographic video showing the claws, the talons of great horned owl. So let's get this started. We're going to move it up to about 2 minutes. Let's see if we can get it go a little bit further. Okay, we'll go here.
Target locked. Now, the owl unleashes another secret weapon. Fringed wing feathers that muffle any flapping sound. It's a double advantage. The owl can still hear its prey while flying, and the mouse doesn't have a clue what's coming. And probably never knew what hit him.
All right, now we saw a couple of things there. One of the things that we saw was the, let me kill this. One of the things we saw was the talons or the claws, which is what we were talking about. We also saw something that harked back to what we were talking about before about the feathers. The owl has a different kind of feather called a fringe feather. It's on the end of their wings, and it helps them have silent flight. So the structure was the fringe feather and the function was silent flight. So that was claws. Now let's look at a different structure, skin covering. So we've already talked pretty extensively about feathers, so we won't go over that too much other than to say birds are the only animals with feathers. The guys in the middle are scales, and this is what reptiles have. Reptiles have scales. It helps the animal prevent dehydration. It prevents the skin being torn. If you'll think about a snake has to slither. The scales on the tummy of the snake are rectangular, helps it gain a purchase on its environment and slither up and down trees, across rocks, etc. Also, the snakes don't have eyelids, so they have a scale that's clear over their eyes. So the structure is the scale and the function is to protect the eye. Now over on the far right is fur. It's from a mammal. Mammals have hair or fur, and it protects the animal from cold, from wind, from water. It provides camouflage And of course, some mammals have very spectacular fur, like a lion has that huge mane that makes him look larger. So the structure is hair and the function is multiple. Uh, Warmth, camouflage, intimidation, all sorts of things. Now, let's look at the skeleton. What does the skeleton do? The skeleton protects the brain and the spinal cord, but it also gives the muscles a place to attach. Look at the skeleton of the cat over the far left. The rib cage protects the lungs and the heart. If you'll look at the crocodile's skull down at the bottom, you see it serves as an anchor for those huge pointy teeth that help it to eat. And another structure is the egg. The function is to cradle and protect the baby. Lauren laid an egg this morning. Here it is. And reptiles lay eggs. Some reptiles have live birth. Rattlesnakes have live birth, and the western ribbon snake has live birth. Amphibians, those are the eggs in the middle, they have a double life, part in water and part on land, but they lay eggs. Birds lay eggs, and two mammals actually lay eggs, the echidna and the duck-billed platypus. So let's very briefly talk about structure and function of plants. Let's talk about some simple structures: the root, stem, leaf, and flower. The function of the root is to anchor the plant and to enable water uptake. The stem is to support the plant, and it's also a conduit for water and glucose. The leaf is where photosynthesis happens. This is where the plant makes the glucose and also releases oxygen as a waste gas. We need that oxygen. And the flower is the reproductive part of the plant. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right here, and we're going to go back. And it's interesting to look at an organism and see what the structures are and figure out what is the function of this. I challenge you to find an animal or a plant, look at it carefully, write down the structures that you see, and see if you can figure out what does that structure do for the animal to help it survive in its environment. If you have any questions, Dr. Gorman will be more than happy to answer your questions. Have a delightful day.
Question is, what is an animal structure and function of animals that we're not used to or not familiar with? Each plant and animal structure has a special purpose. When you think of elephants, you probably envision their long trunks and floppy ears. Both of these structures have specific functions that help animals survive. An elephant's trunk has a special structure that helps him gather food. The big floppy ears help elephants hear noises that are far away and helps the elephant dissipate heat in the hot weather. Now, Mr. Monroe is going to tell you about structures and functions of aquatic organisms.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mr. Monroe, and we're going to be looking at the structures and the functions of some aquatic animals. Now, we're going to be looking at some live specimens, and as I go through those live specimens with you, I want you guys to kind of think about the structures that they have and the function of those structures, which help them survive in the watery environment in which they came from. These animals that I'm going to be presenting in my presentation actually came from our 2 working ponds behind the center. And if you were here with us and it was a good, fair day, we would probably be out there doing a field study, collecting samplings and learning about whatever live specimens we could collect. Now, when people talk about an aquatic organism, especially here at the Environmental Ed Center, the first thing that comes to mind, or the first animal that comes to mind, are fish. Well, I just so happen to have a live fish that came from our pond, and in our ponds we have a variety of different kinds of fish. We have sunfish, which are perch, we have crappie, we have bass, and we have catfish. And I'm going to start out by talking about the body covering of some of those fish. Now, this is a sunfish that's in this bottle or jar of water. And I will tell you one structure that this little sunfish has, that bass have and that crappie have, it has scales covering the skin of its body. Underneath the scales, there is a thin layer of skin. Now, the scales are acting like a protector, kind of like armor, okay? Because they are linked together to form a pretty good bond to keep anything that's pointed from penetrating. That's not saying that it will stop it from penetrating, but it will kind of help it slow it down. Now, there are other structures that we see here. This little fish, you can see that there are fins that are moving. That is allowing this fish to kind of hover. If it wasn't for those fins, then basically the fish would probably sink to the very bottom, even though it's on the bottom now. There are several types of fins. There's what we call the center line, which is an example of that would be the dorsal fin that's right down the back. That kind of balances the fish out. Then we have what we call the pectoral fins, and those are the little fins that you see him constantly moving. Those fins propel the fish forward or backwards, or allows it to kind of hover a little bit. And then we have what we call the anal fins, which in a sense, it's just a single fin at the bottom that again is helping steer the fish, keeping it at a balanced level. All right, well, I'm going to put it down, and I've got a model of a skeleton of a fish, and I want to talk about an area that the fish has where there's a gas exchange going on. We know that fish need oxygen, right? Well, they don't breathe oxygen like we do. They actually have slits on each side of the head, and inside the internal part, just inside that slit, there are filaments or fibers. Those are gills. And as the fish swims, water passes through, and that's where the gas exchange happens. They're able to extract oxygen, which they need to stay alive, using those gills and sending it to the rest of the body that needs that oxygen, just like our lungs do, okay? So the gills, the fins, those are perfect structures that actually perform a function to help that fish stay alive in the environment in which it lives. Now listen, students. The next organism that I'm going to get out is a very special organism. It's unique because it belongs to a group of organisms that we call amphibians. Ms. Fuller kind of mentioned that. In fact, she showed you some eggs of the frog, and that's the organism I'm talking about. We know that amphibians live two lives. The first life is a life that they spend in water. The second life is the life that they spend around the water, around the edge. And I have two questions as I go forth with this presentation and getting a live frog out. I have two questions that I want you to consider or think about while I'm presenting this little animal. First of all, I want you to identify a structure of this animal. And when you identify it as a structure and a function, I want you to think about how it helps that animal stay alive in the pond or the body of water in which it's living. The second question is, I want you to think about what function this structure does and how it works. Now, we know that a frog goes through a number of stages in a life cycle. The eggs, which they're in water, that's that first life. Those eggs hatch, we get a tadpole or tadpoles. And they're swimming around in that water for a while. And basically they have tails, which they use that to propel them. And they're also breathing oxygen with the same apparatus that fish do. And they're breathing using gills. Now, as they get a little older, they go through the next stage. And that next stage is to start getting ready to live on land, which is the second life that they live. Now, the tail's going to disappear. It's going to grow some back legs. and then the front legs are going to develop, and it becomes a froglet or an immature frog. And then it's going to get to the edge of the water, and it's going to start growing. It will eventually become an adult bullfrog. Now, toads also go through those changes. We call those changes of metamorphosis, right? Toads will also do that because they belong to the amphibian group also. Salamanders, they are also amphibians. Now, I'm going to get out my buddy Hoppy, and we're going to look at him and figure out what structure will help him survive, especially because he would actually be in the second part of his life. This is an American bullfrog. It is an adult. And I've had Hoppy for quite a while. I had to put him on a diet because he was getting a little heavy. These guys can eat their own body weight of insects in one day. Now, looking at Hoppy, boy, look at those muscular legs. That's a structure. What do those muscular legs help him to do? Hop. Very strong. But another structure that is there are these feet. Now, we call these web feet. Now, they can serve two purposes. They can serve the purpose of making an excellent platform for him to jump off of, because they do cover a pretty good area when they're down, and he can leap from that. This guy can probably jump 6 to 8 feet from away from me. Now, at this stage in his life, he's going to be spending time on the edge of the pond. So being able to jump quite a distance serves two purposes. He may have to be jumping to try to chase some food down because he is a predator. Or he may be trying to avoid a predator that's trying to catch him. So it's helping him out in two ways, right? Another thing that is considered to be a structure is this skin that he has. We can see that it's kind of wet, slimy, slick. Well, guess what? It's a good thing that it is wet. It has to stay wet or moist, simply because frogs have a 3-chambered heart. And the lungs that are inside this frog, they really don't give him enough oxygen for him to stay alive. So what has to happen, he has to find another source to get oxygen into his body. In this case, guess what? It's his skin. The skin is porous, meaning it's permeable, and it can absorb air through the skin as long as it's wet. So he gets a lot of oxygen through his skin. Now, if his skin was to dry out, Hoppy would be in trouble. He would eventually die from asphyxiation or suffocation, not getting enough oxygen. So the skin is very important. These legs are very important structures because they perform functions to keep Hoppy alive. And not only that, look at his color. Usually around a pond, there's lots of vegetation and he's camouflaged. This guy, again, he can eat his body weight in insects in one day. He's a big eater, especially now that he is an adult. So that's Hoppy the bullfrog. And one more thing, because he can absorb, or he absorbs oxygen through his skin, these animals are excellent environmental indicators. You know, if the air around that pond has pollution or toxins in it, okay, Hoppy, I'll put you back in a minute, then you know what? He's taking it in through his skin, and eventually, if it does have toxins and pollutants in it, guess what? It could be detrimental to his health. Same way with the water. If the water is bad water, it could be detrimental to his health because he's having to use that water to keep his skin moist, and so it will be permeable, absorbent. So they are excellent environmental indicators, okay? Even though they make a lot of noise, and my great-grandmother, she used to tell me, when you hear those frogs making the noise, and we're probably gonna hear them because we're getting rain right now, they're calling for more rain. I don't know whether that's true or not, but my great-grandmother did tell me that. Let me put him up. I got one more animal to show you. And of course, Hoppy is an amphibian. The next animal that I'm going to show you is a reptile that spends most of his life on the bottom of a pond. It is a type of turtle. It is a regular snapping turtle, and his name is Snappy. Now, Snappy, I estimate, well, I've had him for about 23, 24 years. So he's somewhere between 25, 26 years old, okay? Now, if I grab him the wrong way, getting him out, guess what will happen? He's gonna bite. Let's get him out and take a look at him. This is Snappy the snapping turtle. You heard me tell you how old he is. And we can look at him. He's got several structures that perform a function for him. He's got webbed feet, just like that. But if you look at his webbed feet at the end of those little feet, on those toes, there are some very long claws. And you heard Ms. Miller talk about the claws of the reptile that was in her presentation being used to dig. Well, guess what? This guy will dig too, because they spend most of their life on the bottom of the pond. Yeah. When they get this size, they can't swim fast enough to catch a fish. They're going to stay on the bottom of that pond, and when some unsuspecting fish pass by, guess what happens? Wow. They reach out and they snap just like that, and they've got their food. Now, he has also a bird-like beak on the very end. His jaws are very strong. That can be used to tear flesh or meat because he is a carnivore, okay? That shell is another structure. What does it do? What's the purpose of the shell on this snapping turtle? It is to protect him. And you heard Ms. Fuller say that a turtle really can't take his shell off and come out of it like a coat, like you're taking your coat off, right? Well, this is old Snappy, and he has several examples of some structures that perform special functions to keep him alive. And there's nothing in the pond that's going to be looking to chase him down as a prey to kill and eat him, but this guy will try to kill and eat anything that he can get in his mouth. Well, let me put him up. And I have run out of time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gorman. So if any of you have any questions for him, maybe he can answer them for you. You guys have a good day now.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. And a question came in from Alexa Hernandez from De Zavala. And what is the structure of the owl wings? The owl wings, the owl wing is the structure, and the function of the owl wing is to help it fly. Thank you. And now we're going to let Ms. Nash tell us about inherited traits.
Hello, welcome to my classroom. Today we're talking about inherited traits. So traits are things that we can observe, okay? And things like blue eyes, straight hair, how tall you are, all kinds of things. And it's a fun thing to kind of investigate in your own family later on. But let's talk about animals and plants. So I have a plant here, a jade tree, beautiful shiny green leaves. This is a kind of big one. So they get quite a bit bigger. And here's a baby, a little one. Now, if you notice that the leaves are the same shiny green, they're kind of thick and leathery, okay? And these are little and these are big, but these will grow bigger, and in a few months it will look more like this. Take a while to get that big. So these traits, these leaf traits, shiny green, thick, leathery, those are traits, okay? So they're inherited from the parent plant to the young plant. And animals the same way. I have a turtle here, and it's a little model. Okay, when I have a turtle egg, when the baby hatches, it's not like Hoppy. It doesn't come out looking like something completely different. It's a little turtle. And it grows up, and it inherited the shell and the color, the particular color, and the kind of feet and the kind of beak and how big it will eventually get from the parents. Okay. So mama turtle laid an egg, and the baby that came out looks more or less like the parents. And it'll grow up, and again, it's going to have these same traits. A shell, not a strong shell, a dome shape of a shell, not flat, and a color that helps them hide, and feet, not webbed feet like Staffy, but just a land turtle, feet for walking. So those are traits that are inherited from the parents, okay, who lay the eggs, and then the babies look more or less like the parents. Now, let's think about some other animals and see how those things are passed along. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll look at my favorite animal. So my favorite wild animal, I think, well, I have a lot of favorites, but one of my favorites is the wolf. So wolves are pretty amazing. They're so intelligent, so amazing. And they come in a variety of colors. Some are white, some are gray, some are kind of tawny, and some are even black. But if you look at them, they all have those pointy ears, that pointy nose, long legs, and nice thick fur. So they have some variation, and those color variants are inherited, as are the basic shapes of the ears and the nose. Cousin Cody, okay, this looks pretty similar, okay? Pointy ears, pointy nose, smaller than wolf. But again, limited physical variation in the physical traits, except for kind of color. Everything else is pretty much the same for a wolf. However, then we turn to dogs, our favorite animal, our favorite domestic animal. And dogs are descended from wolves. Okay? But look how different they look. You can see a few of them have those ears like a wolf, like a German Shepherd or whoever this is over here, some kind of another kind of shepherd. They've got those pointy ears, but lots of other differences. Okay, and some have the floppy ears, some are little, some are big. Tremendous variation. Dogs have a lot of variation in the physical traits that they exhibit. The kind of ears they have, the color, how long their legs are, all kinds of things. So dogs have been domesticated for anywhere from 20,000 to even maybe 40,000 years. Okay, they've been living with people a long, long time. Every known people on the planet had the dog. Okay, they went to Australia with the first seafaring Australians, okay, like 30,000 years ago. So amazing, amazing, interesting animals. But they've been shaped by humans into all these different variations and various traits. So both the physical traits and behavioral traits have been selected or chosen by people. And for instance, if you've ever met a border collie, mostly black and white dog, and they're sheep herders, and they've been used to herd sheep for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they want to herd. And if there are no sheep around, well, they'll herd children, they'll herd ducks, whatever. Now, some breeds of purebred dogs are very similar in appearance. All those traits are inherited. So that coat color, so Dr. Roman's favorite, the golden retriever here, their floppy ears and sweet brown eyes, and black noses, but they all come in shades of gold. These little adorable Rottweilers here. Okay, they've got floppy ears, their noses are kind of shorter than the golden, and they've got a different color. Okay, but they all look very similar. Okay, they've all inherited these traits from their parents. And then here's my sister's dog, the Dutch Shepherd, and they all have this kind of really cool tiger striped coat and those pointy ears, kind of looking like a wolf. But here's my favorite. And now we're going to talk about the inheritance of a trait, in this case, color. Because my favorite dog is the Labrador Retriever. I like black ones. So Labrador Retrievers come in 3 different colors. The black one, the original color, most of them were, when I was a child, they were all black. And then people started having chocolate ones or browns, and now yellow ones. So these 3 colors. And the interesting thing is that two black parents, a black mother and a black father, can have a litter. Mama can have a litter that contains all those different colors. Okay. How does this happen? So they first figured out the black and the brown. So it turns out that there are genes controlling color. So there's the dominant B and little b. So if you have a dominant B, big B, you're going to be black. So if black father and black mother, big B, little b, have a litter, the babies can get one B from papa, a big B from mama, and that's a black dog. If they get big B from papa and little b from mama, that's again a black dog. But if they get little b from papa and little b from mama, that's going to be a brown or chocolate dog. But what about the yellow ones? Well, they discovered that there's another gene, the E gene. And that one, if you get too little E, it doesn't matter what your B genes are doing, you're going to be a yellow dog. So it's a really interesting example of traits being passed down through the genes, okay, from both the mother and the father. And one gene will tend to be dominant, okay? So it's, in other words, it's expressed. So this dog here has both genes, okay, the gene for black and the gene for brown. But because the big B is dominant, it's gonna look black. This one got two of the recessive gene and it's gonna be chocolate. So behaviors are other traits, like the labs, they love to retrieve, meaning bring things back, and they also like water. These are also strongly inherited. This behavior is selected to help hunters retrieve birds. If you shoot a duck and it falls into the lake, you don't want to jump in that ice cold lake and bring it back. So if you have a handy dog, they'll jump right in and go after it and bring it back for you. They'll also retrieve sticks and balls, and they love to retrieve. They'll do it all day long. And they even have web feet for swimming. Let's stop sharing. So I want to encourage you to look at traits in your own family. And what my favorite one for me is the, they call it the hitchhiker's thumb. Don't hitchhike, it's dangerous, don't ever do it. But my thumb will turn over like that. And most people's won't. So see if your thumb will do that, and go around your family or your classroom and see how many people have a thumb that will go like that. And see if you can figure out, is it a dominant or recessive trait? If you have any questions, you can ask Dr. Garland.
That was one unusual looking trait, your thumb like that, Miss Nash. Yes. Yes, there was a question. Give an example of an inherited trait that helps an animal survive. Camouflage is a trait that helps some animals survive. Other traits such as fur color, speed, and how well an animal can hear also help it survive. And having the prettiest feather is a helpful trait for finding mates. I didn't say much about surviving there. Okay, Ms. Ramirez now is going to talk to us about learned behaviors.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about different types of behaviors. So before we start our presentation, I have a couple of animals that I want to show you. The first is a blue silky chicken. You probably met her before. Her name is Pepper. So while I go pull her out, think about what are some behaviors for a chicken? What are some natural or innate behaviors? And then what are some learned behaviors for a chicken? So think about that while I go pull her out. So this is Pepper, and again, she's called a blue silky chicken because she has a patch of blue skin around her ears, and if you guys were to pet her, she feels super soft like silk. Now, Pepper here has actually learned her name, and she will come when she's called because she thinks she's going to get a treat. And something that is an innate or instinctual behavior for her, she automatically knows those chicken sounds. So no other chicken taught her how to make those sounds. She just knows how to talk like a chicken. And then also she knows how to use her claws to scratch at the ground to look for bugs and seeds to eat. So there is Pepper. Think about some other behaviors for chickens. My next animal is a rabbit named Mochi. So while I pull her out, think about some behaviors for a rabbit. So what might be some natural behaviors and what might be some learned behaviors? So this is Mochi the rabbit, and she has actually learned, she is potty trained. So she knows where to go potty. I no longer have to chase her around the floor and clean up all her mess. She also knows when it's time to go. So she doesn't want to be on camera right now. She's ready to go. So she actually knows when it's time, about time for us to leave around 3 o'clock or so. She will automatically go into her cage, and I really don't have to chase her around the room that much anymore. She's slowly starting to learn her name. So for the most part, she will come to me if I say her name because she thinks she's going to get a treat. Some instinctual or innate behaviors for a rabbit. These guys are natural prey animals. So whenever she hears a loud noise, she will take off running. She's had a busy day today, so she's ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put her back down on the floor. But think about what are some other behaviors for rabbits. So what are some things that we might be able to train a rabbit to do? And then also what are some natural behaviors for her? So I'm going to go ahead and let her go. I'm going to share my screen with you guys and we'll look at some other behavior examples. I do have a couple of essential questions for you guys. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to answer these questions. The first is, what is a behavior? And the second is, what is a learned behavior? And give 2 examples. So take a look at some of these behaviors on the slide and think about which of these behaviors are learned and which of these are innate or instinctual. And just to review, a behavior is anything that an organism does involving an action in response to a stimulation. And again, we know that there are 2 main types of behaviors. We have those behaviors that are learned, that had to be taught, and then we have those behaviors that are innate or come naturally to an animal. So hopefully you guys were able to make a couple of predictions as to where these behaviors fall. Now I'm going to show you guys some other examples. So we have innate behaviors, and we know that innate behaviors are behaviors that animals tend to do naturally. They just know how to do them. They don't have to be taught them. So for example, things like migration and hibernation are behaviors that animals just instinctively know to do. Other examples would be communication. So example, social behaviors with bees. So if we take a look at this little video here, we have bees engaging in a waggle dance. That is their way of communication. They just know how to do that. They weren't taught it. Other examples would be blinking and breathing. We just knew how to do that from the time we were born. We weren't taught those things. Other examples would be bees gathering nectar. They just know they have to do that to find food. And then also nest building. So mother birds know that they have to create a nest in order to lay those eggs. On the flip side, though, we have learned behaviors. And learned behaviors are those behaviors that have to be taught. So the animal either has to practice the behavior or they have to watch and learn from another animal. Examples might be better hunting techniques. So in the first slide, you guys saw the mom polar bear trying to teach her baby cubs how to hunt effectively. Also things like building a better nest. So it just comes with practice. Other things like bees learning better locations for flowers. Now, sometimes innate behaviors and learned behaviors, it might be a little difficult to differentiate between which ones might be which. And that is because sometimes innate behaviors can be modified by learned behaviors. Now, what that means is, let's look at an example. So for example, hunting. The polar bear knows it has to hunt because it needs food, it's hungry. However, the learned part of that behavior would be learning better hunting techniques. Another example would be nest building. The bird knows it has to build a nest. However, it can learn to build a better nest over time. So these behaviors are kind of connected and intertwined with each other. Other examples for people, we have hula hooping, which I still have not mastered. So that's a learned behavior. We also have learning to ride a bike. And I love watching the dog agility shows on TV. So here's a dog going through an obstacle course. So he had to learn how to go through that course by training with his owner. And then here's some examples of behaviors at the environmental center in my house. This is Jabez, our goat here at the center. He is head butting. That is an instinctual or innate behavior. We don't have any other goat, so he didn't learn it from another goat. They are just born to instinctually know to headbutt. Something that he has learned, he actually knows where the food closet is, and he is very food motivated. So oftentimes, if he's hungry, he will go straight to that closet door. These are my dogs. This one is Toby. He knows commands, so he knows sit and lie down and shake. My dogs are also potty trained, and they know several other words such as go outside or go inside or go down or go up. And that one's Abby. She also knows the words too. She's too smart for her own good. She's a little stubborn sometimes. But these dogs, some innate behaviors for these dogs, they actually have a high prey drive. So I did not teach them to hunt or to go after animals. That is just something they instinctually do because of whatever mixed breeds they have in them. So unfortunately, last week they killed a possum, but they've also brought me dead squirrels and birds and other animals into the house. So I did not teach them to do that. That is just something that comes naturally to them. So they have a high prey drive. Other innate behaviors would be things like scent marking. I took them for a walk over the weekend, and they probably peed like 5 times trying to mark their territory. And then of course, barking. I didn't teach them how to bark. That is just something they know how to do. And then in this next little segment, you're going to see my parents' dog coming up. And my parents did not do a good job with training their little dog. This is a little bit. And rather than my parents chasing her around the house to get whatever she has in her mouth that she's not supposed to have, they instead bait her with a treat. Well, that form of training in turn has caused their dog to go around the house looking for trash to find just so that she can get a treat. So she's a rather mischievous little dog. She will go knock over the trash can just to find trash to pull out so she can get a treat. She'll go into the bathroom and play on the toilet paper roll so that she can have a piece of toilet paper to bring in for a treat. So they did not do a good job of training that little dog. But there she is. She had a candy wrapper one time. She had a straw wrapper one time, and that's a ketchup packet that she had in her mouth. And of course, there they go again, giving her a treat, which I don't think she deserved. So our next slide, I have a reflection question for you guys. Give examples of 3 learned behaviors for you or humans in general. And you can see an example of some other animals that have learned how to use tools by either trial and error or watching other animals. So think about how that relates to you. And then really quickly, since you guys aren't able to visit us, I just have a little mindful minute for you guys. So just take time to relax and enjoy the scenery here at the Environmental Center. I'm gonna stop it there. So hopefully you guys were able to at least identify 3 animals and maybe think about what are some learned behaviors for them, but also what are some innate or instinctual behaviors for them. So I'm gonna stop my screen share and we're gonna give it back to Dr. Gorman to answer any questions.
Description of learned behavior. Learned behavior is behavior that occurs only after experience or practice. Learned behavior has an advantage over innate behavior. It is more flexible. Learned behavior can be changed if conditions change. For example, you probably know the route from your house to the school, but if you move, you can learn a new route. Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. And now I'm going to share my screen. During this virtual field trip, students explored how structures and functions enable organisms to survive in their environment. Students also explored examples of traits that offspring inherit from their parents and behaviors that are learned. Ms. Fuller covered structures and functions of terrestrial organisms. Mr. Monroe talked about structures and functions of an aquatic organism. Ms. Nash introduced you to inherited traits, and Ms. Ramirez covered learned behaviors. Thank you, teachers. How did we do? If you would, go to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback and fill out a short form and send to us. We would appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, but more importantly, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your life. Thank you again.